Good afternoon, everybody. Corey Brada from the Hawkeye of the Storm. I don't often record on Sunday afternoons following a Saturday game, but in this case, I felt it necessary, and we will still post some cut-ups from the post-game show with Coach Patterson here in the coming 24 to 48 hours. But given the loss yesterday, how it all went down, and some of my comments during the post-game show, I felt it necessary to record this one. And yes, as you saw in the title in this preview, when is the last time Iowa had a loss like yesterday? I'll explain in just a moment. But first, I do want to thank our sponsors for this video. First of all, IFC, that's Iowa Floor Covering in Des Moines. Bondurant specifically, give them a call, 515-379-7000 for the best flooring advice and the best flooring help out there. Or visit iowafloorcovering.com. And don't forget to get your authentic Hawkeye prints. Be loyal to our sponsors. They've been loyal to this show for a long, long time. These two great companies have been awesome, and they've helped this show stay alive over the years. Under the Kitchen, Randy Engel down at Under the Kitchen. Visit his Facebook page or check out his website, underthekitchen.square.site. So the Hawkeyes falling to the Spartans, and what a loss it was. On paper, you look at this and you're like, all right, 32-20. Historically, this has been a Michigan State program that has given Kirk Ferentz problems. It's been a place that I wouldn't call it a house of horrors, but it's been a tough place to play, especially at night. But let's not fool ourselves, folks. This is not a traditional Michigan State team. First-year head coach in Jonathan Smith. They had a quarterback heading into this game that was around 56, 57% passing completion percentage heading into this game. He had a really poor touchdown to interception ratio, very much in the red. That offense as a whole, very much in the red as it relates to turnover margin. This was a Michigan State offense that was outside the top 100 in total offense, miserable in passing offense, and not very good in rush offense either. And yet they pile up nearly 500 total yards against Iowa, score 32 points. Iowa doesn't force a single punt. Oh, and by the way, Iowa suffered from more poor quarterback play in spite of what I thought to be decent wide receiver play. I saw a lot of guys open. And part of the reason, I think, is because Michigan State loaded the box a lot and said, hey, we don't think you can beat us through the air. And Iowa proved Michigan State right. And the Hawkeyes season has completely changed. They're now completely out of conversation for a possible at-large berth in the playoffs or potential berth in the Big Ten championship game. They're done as it relates to those big goals. So now the goal, the meter, the line in the sand has to shift, has to change to, we've got 3 losses and we're playing for a bowl game. Pride, I don't know what it is. Kirk's going to have to work through this. He's been a pretty good coach as it relates to getting his guys to bounce back over the years. Resiliency has been a strong suit of Kirk Ferentz's, but we can't be over this loss yet. And I know the players have a 24-hour rule. We're not even to the 24-hour mark yet, but we're going to be talking about this one for a while because it's one of the worst losses I've seen as a Hawkeye at heart. And I want to run through some recent seasons. So let's do this, folks. I'm going to run through basically every year, every loss from every year over the past 8 to 10 years. You'll see where I stop to determine when's the last time Iowa had a loss like yesterday, given the situation. And again, I'll explain more about why the situation was so devastating. I kind of highlighted that with the playoff and the Big Ten title races being basically evaporated. But how about we start with 2024? We know Iowa has the loss at Ohio State. That's never going to be a bad loss. The Iowa State loss is not good. But in spite of the fact that they blew a 13-point lead, that's a Cyclone team that's undefeated. How about 2023? Lost at Penn State, got blown out. Embarrassing, but against a really good team. Does not compare to what we saw yesterday. The Minnesota loss at home was bad, but hey, that was a team led by Deacon Hill, and it was kind of a game that was stolen. All the attention went toward the Cooper DeJean stuff, and Iowa still made it to the Big Ten championship game, so it wasn't a devastating loss from that perspective. The Big Ten loss to Michigan, not going to be on my short list, and certainly the loss they had to Tennessee in the bowl game would not make the short list. 2022, we know that was a bad year. I mean, bad from Iowa's perspective. They were 7-5 in the regular season, lost to Iowa State by 3, lost actually a closer game than you would expect to Michigan. That 9-6 loss at Illinois. Remember, that was a game where the camera caught Petrus and Bryan kind of smiling after a Petrus pick, and that was blown out of proportion. Bad loss, bad night, but again, just not like what we saw yesterday. The defense was actually good. It was just a terrible offense, and it's against a team in Illinois that was on the upward trend with Brett Bielema. And that was an Illinois team that had showed life to that point. Again, does not compare to what we saw yesterday. At Ohio State, can't compare that either, even though Iowa once again got embarrassed in spite of good defensive play. The only game in 2022 that I think you could argue compares would be that game that lost them out on a chance to go to Indy. That loss at home to Nebraska was bad, right? And Petrus goes down. They end up playing Alex Padilla. That was the game where Cooper DeJean got hurt, kind of similar to yesterday because Iowa was playing without Sebastian Castro. So maybe that's on the short list. But man, given everything Iowa had coming back, the expectations heading into this season and what they've had invested in the quarterback room and the guys they have there and the new OC, yesterday was worse, in my honest opinion. 2021, home loss to Purdue. That was their first loss of the season. That would be right up there. And Iowa lost that game at home 24-7. The only reason I would hesitate to put it quite on the same level as yesterday is that was a Jeff Brom coached team that had Iowa's number. They had a guy in David Bell who was well known for his ability to get free against Iowa. Heck, he did it the year prior in West Lafayette. Iowa lost to Purdue in 2020. More on that in a moment. Horrible loss. Iowa was a top 3 team. I think they were number 2 at the time. So that would be right there, certainly. But they still made it to Indy. Their playoff hopes, their Indy hopes were still alive when they lost that game. So I'm looking at the big picture there, and I don't know that quite compares to what we saw yesterday. Let's continue. At Wisconsin wouldn't be on my list. Big Ten loss versus Michigan. Kentucky loss in the bowl game would not be on the list. Just wasn't an important game, frankly. 2020, opening loss at Purdue. No. The home loss to Northwestern, that was another bad one, but Northwestern won the West. That was still a good Northwestern team. Let's not forget Northwestern under Pat Fitzgerald had a number of years where they just surprised people. Now, Iowa was up 17-0 in that game, should not have lost, but I just have to think yesterday was bigger, and that loss didn't take them out of the race. There was still a lot of season left. By all accounts, Iowa's out of the race this season. 2019, lost to Michigan, lost to Penn State, lost to Wisconsin. None of those losses would compare. They were all against good teams, and they were all close. 2018, lost to Wisconsin, at Penn State, at Purdue. Jeff Brom coached Purdue team, good Purdue team, and it was on the road. Again, not a great loss. The loss against Northwestern was at home, but another year where Northwestern won the West. So I would not rate any of those losses up with what we saw yesterday. 2017, close loss to Penn State, close loss at Michigan State, overtime loss at Northwestern. Remember that one. At Wisconsin, home Purdue. That was a team that was just really up and down. And I would say the at Wisconsin loss was the most devastating, but you can't say it was a bad loss because it was against a good Wisconsin team. I believe that Wisconsin team won the West. It was the week after Iowa blew out Ohio State, but that was the loss that did them in. It was not the Purdue loss. So you can't say the combination of factors was there like the loss yesterday. So 2016 would be the year we have to point to, and I think it's pretty clear what game I'm going to bring up. It's the loss at home to North Dakota State. That is the last time, in my opinion, Iowa's had a loss as collectively bad as yesterday. And that didn't even take them out of the conference race, right? Because it wasn't a conference game, and they had a lot of guys coming back that year. That's part of the reason why I think that loss was so bad. The expectations were sky high with Desmond King returning, CJ Beathard, George Kittle, all those guys. But again, against an FCS opponent, the wind out of the sails that we experienced. And I'm also kind of relying on my own recollection of all these games. I have been criticized over the last 24 hours about my ability to predict outcomes. Hey, I'm right sometimes, I'm wrong sometimes. Yesterday I was dead wrong. But I will say this, one thing I like to think I do bring to the table is a pretty good memory of games during my lifetime watching Iowa football, games under the Kirk Ferentz regime. There were other embarrassing losses. There were other losses that were extremely maddening and frustrating. I mean, again, I bring up that 9-6 loss to Illinois. That's one of them. The loss to Nebraska in 2022, that'd be up there anytime they lose to Northwestern. But just the combination of factors. And again, I'll stand by what I said. This was not a good Michigan State team. All the numbers say they were mediocre at best, and I will be surprised if they make a bowl game. They're 4-3. I'll be surprised if they make a bowl game. Yesterday was by far their best performance. Maybe they become a new team, but until I see that, until I see evidence that this is more than just a 1 week good performance against a team that didn't play well, Michigan State is still a lower third tier team in this conference. The numbers state that. Certainly, Aiden Childs had not played like he did yesterday until yesterday. And just a devastating loss. We'll continue to talk about that here in the next couple of days. But Iowa's got to completely regroup because it's completely changed the complexion of the season. And it's against a team that had no business losing to. And frankly, I don't think they had any business playing in a close game against. Not with what they did against Washington the week before. Had no business playing Michigan State close, but they did. And they lost 32-20. So there's my little tangent for today. I just wanted to kind of go through some of those results from the last 8 years. I think it's their worst loss in the last 8 seasons, going back to the 2016 North Dakota State loss. And there's some room for opinion in there. But tell me what you think about that in the comments. What do you think the worst loss in the last 8 years has been? Was it yesterday? Was it some other loss? Or maybe it's the worst loss in the last 10 to 15 years. You tell me in the comment section below. Hit that like button, folks, and we'll talk to you very soon.